see if we can start getting some questions here. Hello?
Hello?
Okay. Thought I lost you
Wow.
guys. I'm like, really? Really? I lost you guys? Are you kidding me?
Just to scare you, we're just not going to talk.
Yeah, that'll work. I'll just sit here and talk about things like why is the sky blue? Which way is up? Why is up?
Why don't why don't I have a picture of Corey, Eric, and Chris, and just you?
Yeah, yeah. Why is Eric obsessed with nachos? Let's start with that. Let's talk about why Eric Larson is obsessed with nachos. This is how we're gonna start the podcast.
Do it.
So Eric,
Come
why
on,
are you
Eric.
obsessed with nachos?
Dude, I think we
It's,
all are. He's just open about it. Who doesn't?
you can take nachos anywhere. They're fulfilling. They taste good. It's warm. They can go anywhere. You can eat them with anything. I mean, it's the ultimate food that goes with everything.
I don't know. I did
Some of the
not
stuff
hear
I've seen
on
you
Forrest Gump
Yeah.
that you can mix shrimp with nachos. So
Dude, are you
bet
nuts? Yeah, you
could.
can. Yeah, you can.
no, Bubba didn't say it, so it's not true.
Well, they couldn't fit it all into the damn movie, man. It would have been like 3 hours of what you could do with shrimp.
That would have been an epic
Who are,
movie. I'd
who are you
watched it.
calling a shrimp?
It's in the director's cut.
So anybody tuning in that's listening, if you'd like to ask questions, there's a little chat box in the bottom right hand of the screen. Click in there, type your question. You can direct it to any one of these four. We'll say guys. We'll be nice, and you can ask them any Muskie related question or ask anything. All right, we got our
Okay.
first question. It's not directed to anybody. It is, what is the first go-to bait out of the box in the spring? Who would like to take that?
Oh,
I'll take it. Probably the first thing I'm going to throw is going to be glide baits. A big fan of glide baits in the spring. I'll throw rattle baits a little bit, but I just love glide baits and swim baits. It's probably the two that I'm going to key on the most. And I've started throwing a lot more of swim jigs too. So in the spring, cold water, you can really slow them down. But glide baits number one.
I'll second that actually. That and small jerk baits.
Yeah, I like the oranges, like a Canadian Crush style color is probably the first glide bait I'm going to throw, followed by something white. And then I'm going to throw the swim baits are going to be bluegill or crappie colored. Depends on where I'm fishing too.
Yeah, I was gonna say that definitely depends on the lake I'm on. You know, I do a lot of crankbaits too in the spring. You know, a lot of switch baits, especially for clients. Seems like a lot of them have a hard time catching on to doing a glide bait. So I do a lot of twitch baits, and you know, sometimes smaller bucktails are really good too.
Yeah, chatterbait and a spinnerbait too occasionally.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric, do you have anything to add to that, or are you just going to sit in the background and just hang out?
No, I'm gonna go with Chris. I like a good twitch bait, something that's neutral buoyant or a slow sink that you can give it about a 3-4 foot pull, kind of let it just sit there on a pause, give it another pull, and like Chris and Dwayne say, it depends on the lake. One lake's got a really good twitch bait bite opening weekend, and we've got another lake that's simply a blade bite because of the shallow water and trying to get up super shallow in 6-8 inches of water and moving a bait a little bit faster. It seems a small blade like a small 700 series Booker, something comparable to that, seems to be a better bait than twitch bait because a twitch bait goes too deep.
Okay. Anybody have anything else they want to ask about or say on that? I can't even talk tonight. Flustered. Nope. All right. This one is directed to Corey. Corey, have you caught that
Oh
off-color
God.
giant you caught with Jim since then? And also, how big was that one?
Yeah, actually, some guys caught it. What was it, like November.
Talking to your
We
phone,
got it.
Corey.
November.
There you go.
Sorry, I'm talking right at the phone, at its face. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. No, we got it. I guess it was November, and I'm not usually the guy to say that, but I don't see how there was any way it wasn't that fish. And it had only grown like half an inch. It was like 52.
52.
So that was like a
Not
year
bad.
apart, year and change apart, and it'd grown a half inch.
Yeah, sure. On that episode, I catch baby fish and you catch that. Nice going.
Well, I mean, it's the water too. I mean, you can't say that.
What do you
We
guys put in
struggled
that
for
water
two, and you
down there,
got that.
Corey? Is it you guys put some shine in
No,
down there? Is that what
no,
grows them big?
no. It's these Tennessee lakes are pretty good at growing big everything. To be honest, I mean, they grow. I mean, no, most guys don't know how big the walleyes get down here. They get huge. The stripers get huge. Everything that's kind of a cool water species gets big down here. Melton Hill actually used to produce 30-pound pike back in the 60s and 70s. There were 30-pound pike cut out of Melton Hill, and they used to stock it.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, they stopped stocking it. But I've talked to several biologists that have verified the claims of some of the old timers I've spoken to about that. And well, it's just the cool water whole thing going in with all these reservoirs that have the hydroelectric dams. And it's like there's 40-degree water going into Melton Hill all the time. And there's a lot of them that have, there's actually probably 10 good candidates for musky fisheries like that. Basically, any of the lakes that produce big stripers would produce big muskies under the same conditions, and then some. So I mean, that's kind of what makes this stuff special. Dale Hollow's got some big ones in it. It's just tough to get to them consistently. It's a intimidatingly deep lake.
Yeah,
with
you never hear
relatively few fish.
you never hear much about Dale Hollow anymore. I know it's got big fish.
Yeah, there's some guys that blow it out of proportion and act like they catch them all the time. They don't. But I mean, I'm pretty good friends with guys that bass fish out there a lot. And I mean, they catch one once a year. I talked to a guy the other day who was walleye fishing, and he caught a 46, I guess, last fall. So I mean, they're around. I just wouldn't necessarily go there to musky fish.
Right.
I wouldn't.
So big things come out of Tennessee water. Clearly, Corey is not out of Tennessee water. He's just a little guy.
Oh, the feels. The feels. I think a lot of these southern fisheries are fairly underrated. I mean, aside from Cave Run. Cave Run obviously is a good fishery, but I mean, there's a lot more water down this way than most people realize. I mean, North Carolina, Tennessee, some of the lakes in Kentucky, not too many people fish too much. I guess it gets some pressure, but there's definitely big fish to be had in the South.
Another addition to the question, Corey. Also, it seemed like you change baits and structure often. Is this preference or just spot hopping?
This is trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Are you talking about on that show?
I'm assuming that's what
general?
the question was in regards to, was about the show.
Well, that's kind of a weird time of year too, because the fish. That was kind of a late. We had some weird flows going on, and that was kind of a late spawn thing. And there were kind of fish everywhere, but not a lot any particular area. Like some fish had already moved out. Some fish were still back in the cove. Some of the coves always have fish, to some extent, because they're big enough and deep enough. Those fish that we caught actually came out of like they were probably 60 to 70 feet apart from one another. And that's a cove that I've seen hold fish like year round, but it's especially good in the spring because it's just right there next to the channel, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of victim of it too. Is jumping around a little bit just for the sake of monotony and breaking it. But I mean, lots of areas hold fish,
Yeah. Okay, next question is, for jerks and glides, is a straight wire leader a must?
For glide baits, yes. Jerk baits, that's personal preference. I use fluoro most of the time.
I'll be honest. I don't really use straight wire on anything, and I haven't had much of a problem using glide baits. I tried it one time and I could see where it was a little bit easier, but I don't like straight wire.
I actually prefer a 7-strand, and I prefer a short leader, 4 inches or less. I feel it gives the bait a little bit more action and less hardware that the fish can see, which increases your chance at bait shy fish or hardware shy fish. And I can work probably 98% of the baits with that type of a leader.
Yeah, I agree. All I use is straight steel, small, for glide baits. I don't really ever see a need for fluoro, to be honest with you, for throwing baits. I just think that there's a lot more room for error. Yeah, especially with glide baits, I definitely use the straight steel and smaller ones, but I don't necessarily. I'm the opposite of Eric too. I don't really like stranded. I don't really ever use stranded. Again, to me, there's just a lot more room for error.
Okay. Favorite Minnesota lake? Anybody?
I can't really have an opinion on that one, so.
I'm gonna say mine's
Bemidji.
Vermilion, but that's just because I caught a 57 on there. Other than that, that's the only reason why.
Yeah, probably Bemidji or Plantagenet.
Why?
Why?
Yeah. Why? Why?
Oh well, I didn't hear. I couldn't hear you. Well, we went up there as a club for a number of years, and we caught some really nice fish. And I just really, really enjoyed those lakes. Plantagenet. One of our guys got a 52 there, and then we started catching pike in the 40-inch range too while we were muskie fishing too. But those were the two that I've spent the most time on up there.
Okay. Anybody else have a favorite?
Yeah, I don't have much of a. I've fished a bunch of them. I mean, they're all. It depends what you're looking for. I mean, if you ask guys about what's the biggest, if you're going to get a giant, they're all going to say, probably Mille Lacs.
I got blown out of Mille Lacs. That lake just kicked our butt for a week.
But that's it. Like, do you want to go out fishing for 12 days and never see a fish and then maybe hook a 50-pounder? Or do you want to go out and, catch 20 fish in between that giant? That's what it is. But I mean, Mille Lacs is definitely the king of the giants, most likely. And then, you have Great Lakes like Leech, and I fished Leech. That was a good one. Cass, another good one. Lake of the Woods. There's so many good lakes in Minnesota. It's so hard to narrow it down to one. I mean, then you have the Western Minnesota with DL and, all that over there. Eric, you probably spend more time than most of us in Minnesota. What do you think?
I spend about 2 weeks in August, and I go back for a week in September, depending on how August pans out. And, I guess, too, you got to look at part of Lake Superior up there in St. Louis River. It's underfished. I know it's gone through a tough stretch, but, you could go out there and put 7 fish in the boat in 4 or 5 hours. And like Dwayne says, get into a couple northerns, too. and there's actually a lot of water that just isn't fished at all in Minnesota. That like your Mille Lacs and your Vermilion get pounded hard, and a lot of the lakes put out big fish. I guess that's one reason why I go back there, is the consistency of having the chance at a 50-incher. Almost time we out of 16 years of fishing it, I think I've only gone 1 year where we didn't put a fish over 50 in the boat. Otherwise, we've put at least 150 to multiple 50s in the boat.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, man. I mean, it sounds like the heyday of Minnesota might be over, unfortunately. I mean, not that it's not a wonderful fishery and, still better than any, most other places, but it sounds like it's not as good as it was maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
No, the population's down, but it's still kicking out big fish.
Right.
Okay.
And it's getting a lot more pressure nowadays, too.
Just want to remind viewers, listeners, whatever you want to call it, if you guys have questions to ask, the chat box on the lower right-hand corner is how you get your questions asked. Let's go to this one here. Best reels. What do you guys think is the best reels?
For what?
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll respond. He the last couple of times he's asked a question, he's elaborated more on it. So, or he or she, I'm not sure. It's a he or she here. Until we get that response, we'll go with this next question here. Will Illinois produce 50s on a regular basis?
No.
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 No, I don't think so.
Yeah, but why is that?
Our DNR don't listen.
Go ahead, Dwayne. You go ahead and take it, and then I'll pick up from where you're at.
Well, I mean, that's the $1 million question. Is it the brood stock? I don't know. Is it the forage base? I don't know. You start looking at places like the Fox Chain up where Chris is at. You look at what's happened to that lake in the last 10 years. It's just on fire, and you're getting big fish up there. Down in central Illinois, we have a lot of fish in the mid-40s, but we're not getting many in the 50. There's a few small lakes that'll pop out of 50 here and there, but it's, one of them is just a bluegill crappie forage. There's no shad in it, but yet it constantly will produce, at least 150 a year and sometimes more.
So here's my take on it, and Dwayne hit it right in the head, but I think there's a lot of factors to it too. One is the brood stock for sure. I think our Illinois mutts just, it's what they are. They're mutts. We're not going to get those giant 50-inch fish. And then we even take, this could be a whole hour discussion, but anyway. Yeah. So you take fish from Leech Lake and you dump them into our lakes, but most of our lakes aren't what Leech Lake is, right? So you have a lake like Leech Lake that's, deep, clear, extensive, got current, yada, yada. And then you have those fish in the Fox Chain where it's, 40 foot deep at best. And our thermocline is 17 foot deep. And, it gets hot in the summer. Those fish burn out. It just, it doesn't work that way. You can't just take an animal and put it in a different environment and expect it to do exactly the same thing it did, in its natural environment.
I think you're right. It's part of it is our thermal regime too, because it's such a long state. It's so different from Kincaid up to the Fox Chain that one subspecies of muskies may not work down there, and that's what Green Gene tried to prove, but it really didn't.
Right, and we just don't have, a lot of these lakes are small, relatively small, and those fish, by the time they're 45, 47 inches, they've been caught multiple times. I think that shortens their lifespan considerably. A lot of stress on them.
Yep, I agree.
There's a lot of good sticks out here. You take a place, even the Fox Chain, that's 7,000-8,000 acres, depending if you're counting the river and all that. Those fish get caught a lot. I mean, just in my boat, and you take a couple of other people's boats. I mean, I do well over 100 a year, and there's a couple other guys that are, putting a lot of fish in the boat. I'm like, I mean, those fish are getting caught a lot. And by the time they're 40, and I talked to the biologist, and he said by the time they're 47, 48, they're severely on the decline, and rarely do they make 50 inches because of all those different factors.
Yeah.
Right. So the answer is no. I mean, here the only thing that will change that is if they find a way to make a genetically engineered muskie that can handle what Illinois weather is like and what our lakes offer them. We have great forage. If you put some shad in some of those lakes that Dwayne was talking about, and I know there's a few down by him that are small that have big fish. If you put shad in the one lake that I'm thinking you're thinking about, Dwayne, it's going to kick out some giant fish.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, there was a giant fish caught out of a lake up here. It was a 54-incher, but it's a private lake. It doesn't get much pressure. It's deep. It's clear.
Right.
Those kind of lakes will do that, but our lakes that's just not what Illinois is.
Well, and like I said, we have so many small lakes. We really don't have anything giant. Just here in the Peoria area. Chris, because you've worked down here. Within 2 hours, you've got 20 lakes, but they're all 100, 200, 300 acre lakes.
Right.
Well, can I interject with a question that's just total curiosity? It might be really stupid, but it's kind of lingered on my mind. With the success of the Green Bay fishery, is there not any potential to stock muskies on the Illinois part of Lake Michigan, perhaps? Is there any similar situation that's just not been...
That's a great question, Corey. I mean, is there? Yeah, here's the problem, though, with that, is the forage is the problem down here, right? So we're even having a problem now with our Chinook because there's not enough forage for them to thrive. So to put it really quick, make a long story kind of short, is originally the reason they put the Chinook in Lake Michigan was to kind of tear down the alewives because the alewives were so overpopulated. Well, now that there's been such a huge boom in industry and all that and in the trout fishing, now there's really no alewives left. So now they're having to cut way back on the trout. So there's just not enough forage for even the trout that are in there. So I think putting muskies in there, is counterproductive just because then they're going to start eating the trout, which, you start telling guys who've made their living for the last 30 years catching trout that they're going to stock muskies and their main forage is going to be trout. It's probably not going to fly.
Well, the DNR has talked. They've talked about it, and some clubs have approached them about doing it. But the DNR has said flat out no, because it's going to affect the perch fishery. It's going to affect all the other stuff.
Oh God!
So they don't want.
Actually, your biggest problem with it is it's an open-ended fishery. You'll put all those fish in, say, in the Chicago area or the Racine area, and the Great Lakes spotted is an open water roaming fish, and they could be up in Green Bay 3 years after you stock them, and there might not be a stockable or a fishable population of fish for them. So, it would just be kind of a waste of a resource in that area because there's nothing to hold them there.
Yep.
That was one of my big questions about that. I was kind of curious why it hadn't been done.
Plus, we don't have any money.
Yeah. That's a huge problem in Illinois.
Let's move off of the Illinois thing because it will turn into an hour-long conversation. So let's move on to the next question here.
Well, plus there's tolls for those muskies. They got to pay a toll to go anywhere.
Good question.
That's what's going to
What was the most important thing you learned last year?
Oh boy.
Nothing is stupid.
Except Corey's statement.
I'll go with it.
Fish where everybody else doesn't fish.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, but yeah, thinking. I think all of us in this discussion, especially guys like Corey, I mean, I think that thinking outside the box is a huge thing, and especially in pressured fish. And I know Corey does a lot of that, thinking outside the box kind of stuff, and I've grown up fishing with guys that were like that. And for me, it was really thinking outside the box, and that really made my year much better than it had been even prior years, because the fish just completely did something completely different the last year or so here out in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, we kind of get in a rut where we use this. We take 800 pounds of baits and we use 4. So I really tried last year to make an effort to actually open up some of the boxes and look at the other stuff. So it's kind of like that, just because you've used the same jerk bait or the same glide bait all the time, throw something different, and it has made I want to say more than just last year, but in the last 4 or 5 years, because of the pressure of where I'm at, and there's 800 boats on there. You've got to think, you've got to do different things than everybody else, and right now everybody's out throwing rattle traps, and that's the last thing I'm going to throw.
Next question here. Let's see what we got. Somebody did ask why Eric Larson is into the art of nachos, but we're not going to cover that. We covered that a little bit at the beginning. That'll be available for playback when the live feed is over. Let's see here. Here's one for Eric.
Hey, wait, Eric, that's a serious question.
It's not. It's not. We're gonna move on. One for Eric. Other lakes in the Green Bay area that are worth fishing when the bay is tough. Southern guys.
Absolutely. I watched the northern Wisconsin guys up in Vilas, Oneida County, and if they're catching fish and they're doing good up there and consistently catching fish, the bay sucks because you're fishing 2 different strains of muskies. Now, if the bay is on and you watch the guys up in northern Wisconsin, it kind of slows down. I would say within a half-hour drive of Green Bay, there's a bunch of smaller lakes that have a healthy population of fish that are 34 to 40 inches. They're not going to hold a lot of big fish, but if a guy does his homework, I don't want to name the lakes, name by name, because they are smaller and probably can't take 30 boats on them. But within a half hour, if the fishing's tough or the wind's blowing and you get blown off, yeah, there's definitely a couple good lakes that are worth fishing.
Okay, let's see here. Southern guys, when do you notice the muskies switch from pounder-sized baits to rattle traps? By Southern guys, I'm assuming Wayne and Corey, mainly Corey.
What do you mean by that?
I'm not sure. I didn't ask the question. This
I don't know. I mean,
it
all depends.
Just answer the question.
It all depends on the habitat and the time. I'm working on it. I don't really look at it that way. Because I mean, I haven't been able to fish too much as of late. I've caught a couple nice fish. I actually got out last Sunday and lost a big one. But how about this? I have a friend that I fished with for a long time. I couldn't go out yesterday, but he knows some areas, and I told him, hey, go try this. But he's kind of new to muskie fishing. He's a really good angler, and he went out to a local river system we fish this time of year. And I had just mentioned in passing that, like, I was basically speaking about the lake in the summer, and prop wash trolling. This is something new to him. And I was like, and he checked out the headlocks, and so I guess he bought a headlock. And the SOB caught a 49 trolling 5 miles per hour on a headlock in the prop wash yesterday on a clear river, and it's February. And so I mean, I don't, and that's because I didn't have the heart to say. I was like, well, I didn't necessarily mean this time of year, but that just goes to show you, like, nothing is stupid. I look at the size bait thing, just to be honest, as more of an activity level thing. I mean, I've caught some really big fish in the heat of the summer on small baits. Caught some really big fish on big baits in the wintertime. I think people need to explore the small bait end of things way more often than just a seasonal aspect. Like, why I think people need to stop thinking seasonally. Like, it's a good guideline. But then again, I mean, I know a lot of guys that kind of look at you weird when you have a spinning rod in the boat. And that kind of smaller presentation like that, like where I cannot throw it on a bait caster, that has a place a lot of the year, even when it's not spring. Like little bitty jerk baits, little bitty X wraps, those little flicker chat. I think those are really cool. So I can't really say there's a time that I switch. I mean, I literally bring the whole shit out every time I go, and then just kind of go from there. But I don't know if that really answers the question because I'm not sure that was the question to answer. But I hope that makes sense.
Well, I've really gotten into throwing swim jigs, bass size swim jigs, whether they're half ounce, 3/4, sometimes bigger, because around here the bass guys are all out and all they do is bitch about the muskies biting them off. So you don't have to hear that too many times before you start paying attention. And it's really made a difference, especially when it's tough. It just seems like that smaller swim jig has been just a lifesaver.
I got to agree with Dwayne on that. When we get a tough pattern and, nothing's going in the weeds on the faster baits, I can slide out to a little deeper water on the weed line, slow down and work a small rubber bait deeper, and we can usually get something to go.
Sorry, I hit mute. Another question here. Being new, I've heard that springtime smaller baits are best to use. True or false? That kind of goes along with what Corey was talking about. So let's see if we can cover this one pretty quick. Anybody want to grab that one?
I'll take it. I'm going to go with D, none of the above, because you never know with conditions and everything's always weather related. And doing all the shows, I get to hear guys from all over say what works. And guys in Minnesota are like, yeah, right out of the bat, we're throwing double tens, we're throwing pounders, we're throwing 2-pounders, and we're just starting out big. And you talk to guys in Kentucky that are fishing in spring and, they're going small. So depending on weather and depending on what area you're in, it's going to vary. There's no right answer for it.
I agree with that. I literally think it changes almost by the hour at times.
It can.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with both those guys. Absolutely.
Yep.
You can't go out there and go, well, it's spring, I'm just going to use small baits. Is it a good starting point for a beginner? Sure. If I'm going out in spring, chances are I'll probably start with something a little smaller, and then I'll move up, depending. So as a beginner, for a beginner, I'd say it might not be a bad idea to think smaller out the gate a little bit. But I mean, you can't just go, well, they're not eating small baits today, we're done. I mean, there's times where you gotta, it depends where the fish are at. If the fish they're out in the basin, I'm probably not gonna throw something real small. It depends.
Dwayne, you got anything?
Well, and the whole small thing is. Oh God, never mind.
Go ahead, Corey. We know that if
you I was just saying, a lot of times, like guys that think small think musky relatively small, and so like a lot of guys, like a small bait is. When I think musky fish, I'm thinking like a 6-inch bait.
Right.
And when I think small, I'm thinking more like 3 or 4, sometimes 2. I mean, it's pretty that one fish I caught on that show with Sarek. I was a little bummed I didn't get to show the bait. It was like a 3-inch bass crank, and stuff like that. It's most guys, especially that's down here, you have guys that legitimately get interested in the musky fishing, and it's usually because they've had an encounter bass fishing, and then they act like that they have to totally switch gears to do this. And I tell them straight up, I'm like, well, if you bass fish, you've already got about 30% of what you need to musky fish. And they just kind of look at me really weird. And I'm like, well, you've got I'm sure you've got some deep cranks, and I'm sure you've got some X-wraps and some musky jerks and some spinner baits. And they're like, really? I'm like, well, what did you have that fish that you caught or hooked it on. I mean, that didn't happen by accident. And so that I think a lot of guys that are musky fishermen, regardless of the season, need to think more along those lines too. Like, it's not just a seasonal thing. I definitely think it's a good place to start in the spring. But I definitely think it's a good place to go to any time of the year if you're not seeing results on big stuff.
You know, Chris, you know how many fish we caught on square bills down here.
Oh God, yeah.
And the chatterbaits. I mean, so we're talking the smaller stuff has been a good producer. So you're right when you're talking about the bass guys. That's what kind of gets me back to the swim jig. Like I said, don't have to hit me in the head more than 6-7 times before I figure things out.
Well, that's because you're smart too, Dwayne. I know lots of guys that don't.
Well, sure, right.
Easy, Corey.
Can I add to that?
It's just because I'm an old fart.
Ancient. What was Jesus like, Dwayne? Go ahead and add to that, Eric.
It's good to downsize and stuff too, but depending on the year, more so important than size of bait, it's actually retrieval speed. Between slow crawling, a medium speed, or burning it, that's something there. That's a whole nother ball game too. Is it the big bait? Is it the small bait? Or is it more so because I'm burning the crap out of this, or I'm slow rolling it that's getting the fish to go?
Very smart. Yep. Speed.
Okay, let's see here. We'll go back to the real question. The question was asked about go-to reel company and reason, and that is along the lines of general fishing. So what reel you use for general fishing, the maker of it, and why you think it's the best. Don't all run at once. Who's going to answer that one?
I don't have as much experience as other guys. I've been really happy with the stuff Okuma's put out as of late.
Yep, I used the Okuma stuff for years, but I don't use just one. I use just about everybody's stuff. But anymore, I'm finding I really like the low profile stuff much better than the big round reels. I've got big hands and I palm all the time. So one thing I'm really doing is trying to switch over to the lower profile stuff. It's more comfortable.
Yeah, I don't know if there's one company that, I'm sponsored by Abu Garcia, and they're a great reel, and they have their great reels. Like any other company, there's certain reels that are great in their line, and there's ones that I wouldn't necessarily say are great. Just like any other company, there are certain reels out there that I think are built much better. So, it's like anything else. If you spend your money, you get what you pay for. I've heard a lot of good stuff, and I've actually used the Revo Toro Beast, and that's been a very good reel for people. It's been good for guys who are real pros, the guys who clean them and fix them and all that stuff. If you talk to these guys, they say it's one of the best built reels out there. The Tranks, obviously. Just don't go cheap on a reel. That's it. You're going to get, especially, if you're fishing a lot like, us guys do, if I fish 300 days a year, if I spend $100 on a reel, that reel is going to be shot in 3 weeks. But if I get a reel that it might cost a little bit more money, but I might get, I have reels now that literally have been through 4 or 5 seasons with me. And, all you do is every year take them in and get them cleaned out and get them, get a little cleaning on them, and they're still running hard. The Shimano Calcutta D's, the TEs are fantastic reels. Those things are workhorses. It really depends on what you're doing too. I like to have a reel that has speed behind it. it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to always use that speed and I'm always going to crank hard, but I always like to have it in my back pocket if I need it. So, and that goes along with the Tranks and the Beast. So, yeah, you can't really just sit on one Unreal, unfortunately.
Hey, Chris, have you seen the new Max Toro from Abu?
I haven't, no.
It's I saw it when I was down with some training with Bass Pro, and it's $150 reel, and it looks sharp, but I don't know anybody who's even used it. But the price point on it at $149.99 is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean I'd love to take it out and beat it up for a while and see what it does, and I mean even like those Revo Toro HSs, I still have them around, but I'll tell you what, I mean I love them. They're super comfortable, but I at least once a year have to take them in to get rebuilt, or they don't take the beating from guys like us. If you're fishing once a week or once a month, absolutely. If you fish every day, they're not going to withstand pulling 9s and stuff like that.
Well, and that's the issue. Like when you're working at a show and somebody asks you this question, that's the thing you've got to find out. What are they fishing? How often? Where? What do they like to throw? So, when you say what kind of reel, you kind of got to know more than just what's your favorite reel. It's what are you going to do with it and how often, like you said.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Got a question for Eric here. And your new frog bait, it says, how do you personally use the new frog bait?
Well, when we prototyped it out for a year, I really liked giving it a 3-foot pull, a slight pause, reel up the slide, another 3-foot pull, slight pause, and that seemed to be the best. And it seemed to work even better on days if I was guiding and we didn't move anything for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and we went out to a deep weed line or a little deep water, and we worked it deep and we worked it slow, we ended up getting a lot of the neutral fish to bite.
So you hop it.
Yep.
You hop the frog bait.
Yes, but it's actually not a true hop. It's more of a glide because it sits level in the water, and it's not nose heavy that it's going to dive down on the pause, or if you give it slack line, it'll actually kind of suspend where it's at on that level. So if you want to work it down 8 feet and keep it at 8 feet all the way to the boat and then rip it up right underneath the boat, you can. If you want to work it down 1.5 feet or 2 feet, you can.
I can't wait to get it in the water Tuesday.
Do you have
Are they in different sizes, Eric?
Do what?
Yep.
Are you making those in different sizes?
Yep, we've got the bass size, which we're starting with now, and will be available this weekend at the Wisconsin Fishing Show in Madison. And we came out with the regular and the mag size at the Muskie shows, and I've got a spring size, which is in between the regular and the bass size. We're still working on a harness for. The molds are all cut. We just got to get a harness made for them and give them a little bit of water time. So probably next spring you'll end up seeing that size.
Nice, really cool. Wayne, I could see those being really good down by you.
Yeah, I've actually got some of his prototype for the little ones to play with, and they just look amazing in the water. The bass guys are going to eat them up, but the musky guys are going to love them too.
Sweet,
What?
nice job, man.
Well, and the
I
cool
think
thing is
northern
gonna be,
too.
Go ahead, Eric.
I think the northern guys that, go up to Canada and they fish on the northern lakes, or guys that are casting off their dock, or, in the small 12-foot boats that go out and fish for anything. I think those guys are just going to eat them up. I think it's a good size. It looks good in the water. It's different from everything else that's out there.
Yeah, I can't wait to. I'm going to throw them on a spinnerbait because I think the little bass size are going to be great on a spinnerbait because those legs move so much water. And then again on a swim jig, and then I'm going to just try doing it like a swim bait too. The action's amazing.
So do they come without hooks or just the actual?
Well,
Without,
yeah.
I've heard most bass guys, talking at the Muskie shows to guys at Bass Fish like Dwayne and other guys, and some of these bass forums on Facebook, it seems like they're pretty picky how they rig their stuff, and you can rig them different ways. So to start out, we're going to have them just plain where you can put them on a weighted swim hook or you can put them on a jig. And then I think maybe down the road here, we might get into putting like a jig head or some type of a harness in them for maybe guys that want something a little bit different.
Well, and plus you can rig them weedless, and you can throw them up over the pads and do stuff like that. So it's going to be a neat little bait. I'm pretty excited about it.
Oh, that is cool.
They might even work for muskies in the springtime too, because they're not overly small. That if you get on an action lake and throw them up shallow where you get that tadpole hatch, guys might really like them for, say, like the Eagle River chain in June. It might be a bait out there that might get some 34s and 36-inch fish.
Nice. Good job.
Okay, we have. I just lost. I clicked on the hole. Bear with me 1 second here. Aha. Found it. How do you target open water fish? Anybody?
I don't have not a lot of water fish.
Yeah. How do you track those 5-foot areas there, Dwayne?
Yeah, the shipping channels. The main lake I fish is average depth is 2.9 feet. So open water is a pothole.
Yeah. What about but you have open water on like Banner and some of those other lakes, right?
Yeah, and I'll troll crankbaits down the middle of that. Sometimes, you'll hit the edges, nothing's going on, and sometimes I'll just watch the electronics and looking for shad or bluegill and crappie and put a crankbait down and just go and cover as much as I can. But there's just not a lot. Lake Evergreen's another one that has a little bit, but even that is kind of limited.
Now with those kind of lakes, Dwayne, is there something that you're necessarily looking for when you're running baits as far as depth, considering they're, like Banner, that it's, really clear? Are you looking more for where the bait is at, or are you just kind of like, where would you start with your baits back? Where do you want the depth at? I
look for 14 feet of water, and that's just because I've fished there forever. And that's usually where I'll start. And then I just experiment with length of line out the back and things like that. But that's where I'll start. And then if nothing's there, because a lot of those banks on Banner, and Caden can verify it too, they're very steep. So you can be in 14 feet of water and your rod's still almost touching the bank. So that's kind of where, as a word general rule, same way on Evergreen, that's kind of where I'll start. And then I'll either go shallow or deeper. And I'm always trolling something in a shad color and something in a fire tiger when I'm doing it.
Okay.
Till I get it dialed in, and then I'll switch. But that's generally what I'm doing.
For me, it's all about the shad. I try and find the bait fish wherever I'm at typically. Even if it takes me an hour of just kind of driving around, if it's a lake I fish every day or a lake that I haven't fished, or whatever it is, I'll drive around, kind of figure out where everything's living at and where everything's kind of at that time. And if I see, the bait fish, then I know that there's going to be muskies. In our waters in Illinois, a lot of times I'm starting almost at the deepest point and then kind of moving inwards, quite honestly, because there's always going to be muskies suspended in the basin, no matter what lake you're on. I mean, I don't know about, that's just what muskies do. So I don't know a lake that doesn't have muskies in the basin. So you can kind of start by just scanning with your electronics, finding out where everything's at, where everything's living at, and then kind of start deep and go to shallow. You know, if they're not out in that deep water, you kind of run the next, you know, let's say the deep water is 40 foot. Try that, and then you just kind of, you know, have your side imaging on and your down imaging and looking around. And then once you find it, you know, you lock it in on your electronics and you can start I mean, typically I like to start casting, or even start trolling it. So, I mean, that's kind of what I hone in on is where the bait's at. And then, you know, I start casting at it. And a lot of times I feel like when you're trolling, you know, of course you can cover a lot of water trolling too. But something I did kind of realize this year I had this was where, you know, there was a lot of trollers and they weren't catching fish and I was casting and these fish were coming up a little bit lazy and I can convert those fish that were not eating on the troll or the fish that weren't eating out from the boat and put them into a figure eight and get them to eat. So I think a lot of the trollers were just maybe going either too fast or just wasn't that trigger that they wanted. And then with clients too, you know, there's times where, you know, I mean, if you're trolling for 6 hours and you don't get a fish, basically they've just taken a boat ride with you for the whole day. At least if you're casting with them and they see 7 or 8 fish, then they're like, well, we've seen fish and I had my shots at them and it's just kind of a different game. You know, that's kind of how my take on it is.
That I'm right there with you because I only troll when I have to. I mean, it's a necessary tool, but we're going to cast 80% of the time, but there's that time, and it seems to be around here, in my experience, has been in May and June seems to be a really great, early June seems to be a great trolling bite.
Yeah, same here.
On lakes like Evergreen and even Banner. So I really, if I'm going to troll, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait until that time, but most of the time I'm casting. And even in the fall, I've got a little trolling pattern on Spring Lake that works and has caught a lot of fish, but it's not something I want to do all the time.
Right.
And I'm not a guy that uses planer boards or anything like that. We're real basic. I like to feel the fish hit, and so do the clients.
Yeah. Have you ever tried planer boards on that lake? Because I think I know where we've talked about where you've trolled at, Dwayne, you know?
Yeah. On Evergreen, I have, but you have so much traffic out there. If you start getting planer boards out, and you know, on Spring Lake, you know, there's some people that troll out there with planer boards and do some stuff that cause problems, but
I didn't know it was possible.
It's more trouble. It's more trouble. It's more trouble than it's worth for me.
Right.
So you're telling me I can't come down with 10 rods?
We don't want.
No, you can. You can do what you want, but then you're going to have guys like Dwayne and I throwing stuff at you.
Yeah, and you don't have the shots to come to Illinois, so.
No.
We don't want him here. All right, guys, we got a little over 6 minutes left, and let's try and get these last 2 questions answered. First one is, what are ideal conditions for throwing twitch baits? And the last question, we'll answer that, and then we'll do the last one. What are the ideal conditions for throwing twitch baits? Bueller?
I like lots of bait fish and lots of forage fish. When the bluegills are spawning, seems to be a really good time. On some of the lakes that I fish, there's a few lakes that you can actually watch the muskies going along the edge of the lake and grabbing the bluegills. So I really like to twitch when that's going on, or if I've got a lot of shad, if I find some schools of shad.
Very good. Anybody else?
Shallow water, neutral, active fish, I guess.
What was that, Corey?
What'd you say, Corey?
Just shallow water and neutral to active fish. Probably I guess it depends on how you work it, but it seems to work better more with like neutral. Like if you're working the shit out of it, I mean, that's more of an active thing. But talking about a bait, you can sit, hit it and then let it sit there for a second. Like, I think that's one of the things that I came to realize the more I fished was I didn't used to think when I was a kid fishing that, I didn't think that fish that were shallow were necessarily inactive. I thought for them to be shallow, they were inherently active. And that's not the case at all. Especially in the spring times of year where fish seem to, whether pre-spawn, post-spawn, and there's a lot of big fish, at least that I've seen around here, that they don't quite move out from the spawning areas yet, and they'll be sitting. Big fish will sit very shallow for extended periods of time, and a switch bait's really good for that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Corey. I'll add like another 2 cents on that real fast. Is I'm getting a lot of following fish. I don't think that there's a better figure 8 bait out there than a twitch bait, because you could slow it down, speed it up, stop it, hang it. You could do about every little thing in the world to make a fish in the figure 8 eat. So if I'm seeing a lot of fish, I just can't get them to eat, I'll throw on a twitch bait so I can kind of mess with them a little bit more.
Yep, I agree.
That's good.
Eric, you got anything you want to add to that?
Like weeds, early spring, something you can twitch real slow to get kind of neutral fish to go, and then sometimes switching up in the summer, warm water, just working it really, really aggressively and going for a reaction strike.
Okay. Well, we got 3.5 minutes left. Let's see if we can get through this last question before we do that. Thank you guys for doing this. This has been kind of a neat experience. I think we should try and do it again sometime. Get a little bit more planned out and kind of not winging it like I have been. But again, thanks guys for doing this, and I appreciate your time. So our last question, for trolling, are longer leaders necessary, like 3 feet or so, or can you get away with an 18-inch or so leader?
Yes.
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 Can you get away with it?
Why do people use the longer leaders anyway? I'm just curious. I've never done it.
I think it came from when fish were biting and rolling. They would roll and roll up in the leader and get in the gills. But my philosophy, and I use a short leader trolling, is if you keep pressure on the fish at all times, you're not going to get that fish to roll. You won't have that problem of getting line or the leader up in the gills.
Okay, that's it. That's exactly it, Corey. Was just basically because when they roll, they roll into it. Is it necessary? No. I mean, I don't see why not use it though, because it's not like it's gonna affect action. It's not gonna affect. They're not gonna see that line any more than they are line. But you can use shorter leaders. There's no reason not to. But I just like the extra. You get to guys on Claire or some of these other guys, and they'll even like double up their line at the top of their notch. They'll make so that it's actually like doubled up, so there's like room for error there if the fish rolls. Big fish sometimes they'll do silly things. I've never had it personally where they roll and cut something, but that's the thought process behind it.
I'll add to that.
Okay.
My thing with longer leaders that I've always been taught, and the reason I've done it is mainly for trolling around rocks. Because if you get your bait in bouncing around that, the leader will protect your line more. Because if you get it, hung up with that crank lip, especially on a rock, and your boat's pulling on it, your line can hit that sharp edge of that rock, and that'll chop it off. So that's always been the reason that I was told, longer leaders was just for keeping your line away from rocks and things.
That's a good point too, Caden. That's a really good point.
Yeah, that makes.
That's what I grew up with. That was what it was for. So if you're going through timber and your line's rubbing or rocks, it just helps you protect your line. But do you have to? No. But if you've used it and it works, great. If not, more power to you.
Well, I think one thing with the new technology, it's good to have a longer leader because you can add a weight to it, or you can add a weed catcher to it, and that's right. 3 feet in front of your bait. So
another great point. Yep, exactly.
Well, guys, that's the end of this podcast. We are down to 10 seconds, and it'll cut us off. So we'll do this again. Thank you guys for coming and doing it, and thanks for the questions, everybody.